Human thinking and science. Let us consider the word thinking. There are several ways of thinking, but generally spoken, we can distinguish three ways: the scientific way, the common sense, and the authentic way, as we call it. In the deeper sense, the more authentic way, thinking is a way of thanking, of saying thanks. Thanks to whatever, God, life, your own conscience, or whatever. Now we like to think about thinking in science, about scientific logic, or the other way around, the logical structure of science. In so-called academic cultures, we also see some interest for this subject. Evaluation and sometimes even prescription of how science thinks or should think. Science has an enormous influence on our way of thinking, on a much larger area and scale than within the scientific discipline itself. Not only by the content, but also by the specific form of reasoning. This influence has, in a way, overshadowed the other ways of thinking we talk about later on. Well then, what is the character of this dominant way of thinking? This character is a combination of elements. These elements can be everything in the field of observation and perception. It can be observation in laboratory context or in the field. These scientific observations obtain certain conditions. They obey certain conditions. Not every perception is a scientific observation. In fact, science is a sort of group process. In that group, agreements are made about what is an observation and what is just, so to say, some perception. The most important demands that are made on observations is that they are controllable by the group we talked about, the scientific community. This community has a great importance in these days in the Western world. Historically, we may say that it has to some extent replaced the way of thinking and reasoning in the religions that preceded it. We believe to some extent in science, in its objectivity that is stated by proofs. What requirements are imposed on a proof? When is something true for the scientific community? As said, when the elements, the observations are controllable and verified by the community. And secondly, if the elements are combined in an interconnected and right way. That is according to the rules of logic. That means in practice mostly by the way of mathematics. Around these theoretically simple demands, the scientific community is formed. In a certain way, a vast amount of information is neglected, of course. That is quite obvious. We talk about the subjective perception that is not controllable by everyone. The concentration on perceptions that are controllable by everyone has great advantages and also disadvantages. The advantage is that it has brought concreteness in the Western world. It also brought more independence of emotions, of course. It can also bring, in a way, more foundation to morality. We all know that concrete, practical and controllable morality often forms the ultimate test of moral inspiration and even more of moral emotion, so to say, like moral outrage, aversion, fanatism or bigotry. Another advantage is technology, of course. It serves our comfort and gives, hopefully, a balanced basis for future and durable existence. It is very interesting to consider technique as a sort of coagulation of combining thinking. Technical instruments are literally combinations of elements. Of course, and in due course, the development of combining intellect caused the enormous evolution of technique as we know it. And the other way around, technique, or rather the success of technique, stimulates us to emphasize more and more the value of combining intellect. Thinking, thought, that is unilaterally a process of combination, also has a disadvantage, which is that it is not the only way. There is namely another way, most important way of thinking, we talk about later on.